Good morning. Today we're releasing the Government of Alberta's 2020-21 annual report, along with final fiscal results for the year. The report provides a detailed look at what's been a very challenging year. Albertans have grappled with the largest global economic recession since the Great Depression, an unprecedented drop in energy prices, and we battled a pandemic within our borders. Overall, the report reflects the incredible challenges we've faced as a province. But it also reveals a solid foundation upon which to build and some encouraging signs which point to better days ahead. Alberta ended the 2020-21 fiscal year with a deficit of $16.95 billion, which is $9.5 billion higher than budget 2020, but $3.2 billion lower than the third quarter forecast provided in budget 2021. While Alberta's resource-based economy was hit much harder than most jurisdictions, energy prices rebounded in Q4, the forestry and agriculture industries were strong, and emerging sectors such as tech all contributed to an improved economic outcome and increased government revenue. Revenue for 2020-21 was $43.1 billion, which is $840 million higher than the third quarter forecast reported in budget 2021. Total expense in 2020-21 was $60.1 billion, $2.4 billion less than the previous Q3 forecast. While the government necessarily provided additional resources to deal with the pandemic and related economic fallout, we also continued to focus on efficient government and cost control. I want to point out that government operating expenses came in $1.2 billion lower than budget. My government colleagues and I remain committed to ensuring the most efficient use of taxpayer dollars, which is more important now than ever before, after years of overspending by successive governments and with the province's finances further strained by the pandemic. Overall support for the COVID-19 response and Alberta's recovery plan totaled $5.1 billion, plus $460 million in capital investments. To ensure health had the required resources to deal with the pandemic, we provided an additional $1.5 billion to the healthcare system. This included support for continuing care, surgery mitigation, mental health, vaccine distribution, personal protective equipment, and more. We also provided small businesses directly impacted by the public health restrictions with over $625 million in relaunch grants. The government deferred billions of dollars in fees, student loan payments, and taxes to assist Albertans and Alberta businesses with liquidity, in addition to WCB premium rebates, commercial rent assistance, and the tourism levy abatement. And we also provided support for homeless shelters, women's shelters, and food banks to help prevent people from falling through the cracks. All of these actions have been instrumental in helping Albertans and Alberta businesses weather the pandemic and economic downturn. In Budget 2019, we presented a credible four-year fiscal plan with a balanced budget. The pandemic and related economic challenges have undone that plan, but a balanced budget remains important to this government and, I believe, to most Albertans. To guide and inform our fiscal decisions during this time of uncertainty, we introduced three fiscal anchors in Budget 2021. First, the government is living up to its commitment to keep Alberta's net debt below 30% of its gross domestic product, or GDP. In the first post-COVID fiscal update we presented last August, we projected a net debt to GDP ratio of 22% at March 31, 2021. I'm pleased today to report that our ratio was 19.3% as of March 31st, considerably stronger than the projection. Keeping our net debt to GDP ratio healthy ensures a strong balance sheet and positions the province for fiscal recovery. Second, the government is committed to bringing our cost per capita of delivering government services in line with comparator provinces. Simply put, we can no longer afford to be an outlier. And third, the government remains committed to balancing the budget. We will set a clear time frame for getting back to balance once the pandemic is over and government has a clearer idea of the long-term global impacts. Throughout the past year, Alberta's sights have been set not only on getting through the pandemic, but on building a foundation for the future. To that end, a major focus of Alberta's recovery plan was to invest in strategic capital projects supporting infrastructure Albertans rely on, but also to support thousands of good-paying jobs. In 2020-21, spending under the capital plan totaled $6.9 billion. This investment focused on maintenance and renewal projects that could get people back to work immediately and protect the province's infrastructure investment. This included upgrades and repairs at schools, colleges, universities, and to roads and bridges all across the province. The recovery plan funding also included strategic infrastructure projects that will help build the foundation of our new economy, such as a highway interchange in Leduc, twinning highways throughout the province, including Highways 3, 11, and 40, and expanding the Lethbridge Exhibition Centre. Additional economic stimulus funding specifically for municipalities helped improve stormwater drainage and flood mitigation in Calgary and Wood Buffalo, helped to expand and improve the fibre optic network connectivity in Red Deer County, and upgrade and construct affordable housing in Edmonton. The capital plan remains a key element of the government's recovery strategy, and looking forward, the 3-year capital plan for economic recovery and growth has been a primary focus this past year. In fact, economic recovery and growth is essential to meeting our great fiscal challenge. Our recovery plan builds on our strengths to grow and diversify, a plan that recognizes that both our core and emerging sectors are critical to economic recovery. We accelerated the job creation tax cut, making Alberta the most tax-competitive jurisdiction for businesses in Canada and among the most attractive investment destinations in North America. We introduced the Innovation Employment Grant and recapitalized the Alberta Enterprise Corporation. With the province's competitiveness improving, Alberta reported a record $455 million in venture capital investment in 2020, doubling 2019, which was the previous record. Another important element of our economic recovery and growth effort is red tape reduction. This past year, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business gave Alberta an A on our annual red tape report card. We made life easier for Albertans and their businesses by eliminating 15.7% of the province's regulatory requirements, which surpassed our 12% cost target for the year. While there's much yet to do on our economic recovery plan, there has been meaningful progress to date. Agriculture and forestry facilitated $359 million in investment in the agri-food sector, which is expected to lead to the creation of 1,147 full and part-time jobs. We partnered with the Canada Infrastructure Bank and 8 irrigation districts on a historic $815 million investment in irrigation infrastructure, which is expected to lead to the expansion of more than 200,000 irrigated acres and will support economic recovery in the province. Alberta's government also launched the Site Rehabilitation Program and the Alberta Petrochemical Incentive Program, which will attract billions of dollars of investment and generate tens of thousands of jobs. The recent $1.3 billion Air Products Canada hydrogen announcement is a sign of what's to come. The annual report also reflects positive developments on pipeline construction. The Enbridge Line 3 project is replacing 1,600 kilometers of 60-year-old pipeline between Alberta and Wisconsin, restoring original capacity of 760,000 barrels per day and providing reliable energy, jobs, and economic benefits on both sides of the border. In addition, construction continued on the Trans Mountain Pipeline project in 2020, which will increase capacity from 300,000 to 890,000 barrels per day when operational in December 2022. While there's much left to do, I'm encouraged by many recent positive developments. Many economic forecasters expect Alberta to lead all provinces in real GDP growth this year, including the Conference Board of Canada, BMO, CIBC, and Desjardins. Between 2018 and 2020, the number of tech companies in Alberta nearly tripled from 1,200 to more than 3,000. And the most recent business expectations survey from the Business Council of Alberta saw a massive rise in confidence and positive expectations. The pandemic, global economic contraction, and energy price collapse has created an incredible fiscal challenge for our province, which is evident by the $16.9 billion deficit. However, I'm encouraged with our improving economic and fiscal picture. I want to assure Albertans that we will continue to be laser-focused on positioning Alberta for economic recovery and growth and for a future that is fiscally sustainable. Thank you, and I'm happy to take some questions.
We will now go to the media Q&A. You will have one question, one follow-up, either two off the top or one question, one follow-up following the response. We will start with those in the room and then go to those in the phone. Before you begin your question, please identify yourself with your name and outlet. And with that, we'll start with the first question here at the mic.
Hi, Minister. Tom from Global News. I want to get on the path back to balance. You spoke about once we're through the pandemic and we'll get a clear idea of when we're going to get that. Restrictions are being lifted tomorrow. We've been warned of a fiscal reckoning. At what point are Albertans going to see what that path to balance looks like? Are you expecting it to be in the next budget?
Sure. Well, Tom, I appreciate that question. Firstly, it's going to be great to get to tomorrow when we really move into a major reopening in terms of public health restriction reductions. And we know that that will have a very positive impact on the economy. The reality right now is there's continued certainly uncertainty, economic uncertainty globally around the pandemic. There's uncertainty around when every nation, every country, every jurisdiction is going to be able to drop public health restrictions. And that is creating commodity price uncertainty. My expectation, my hope would be that by budget time, budget 2022 time, we will have additional clarity. And we can lay out a path to balance. We've committed to Albertans that we would do that when we're past the pandemic, when we can properly anticipate the global economic effects of the pandemic, and we will do that.
I want to ask about Keystone. There's a couple different numbers in the document here. I'm not an accountant, so I'm kind of going through them. But do we know the final cost of Keystone? We saw the $1 billion equity payment by the end of last calendar year, and then another $1 billion payment through APMC just a couple of weeks ago. Did Albertans pay $2 billion in this project, or what's the final number on that?
No, we have not. I'd stated earlier during estimates in budget 2021 that the cost to the Alberta government with respect to our Keystone investment would not be materially more than $1.3 billion. That remains true today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll take another question here in the room.
Hi there, Janet French from CBC. So the Parliamentary Budget Officer in Ottawa today had this Fiscal Sustainability Report 2021. And in the Alberta summary, it says current fiscal policy is not sustainable over the long term, and says that either permanent tax increases or spending reductions of about equivalent of $9.5 billion a year would be necessary to be sustainable. What goes through your mind when you hear that?
Well, look, Janet, we're focused right now on what we can manage, which is the bottom half of the income statement. We made a commitment to Albertans in budget 2019, which was a 4-year fiscal plan that arrived at a balanced budget within our first term. We made a commitment to Albertans in that fiscal plan to bring down, carefully and thoughtfully, bring down our cost per capita of delivering government services to align with comparator provinces. That process continues. We've made progress on that goal. That process continues, and we expect actually to begin to get into the range in 22-23. We think that's the first step in putting this province on a sustainable fiscal trajectory. Again, right now, we've seen incredible volatility in commodity prices. Certainly, even within the global economy, there's been great uncertainty. And while we're focused on ensuring that we're delivering efficiently and cost effectively to Albertans, I've been clear all along. Once that job is done, it will be important that we strike a revenue review panel, a panel that will take a look at the appropriateness and efficiency of our revenues, and we would intend to do that in the future.
And that was actually my next question, is I do recall you pledging to look at the revenue side of the balance sheet. What's your timeline for that, and what will be the scope of the work that they'll be assigned to do?
We don't have a definitive timeline at this point, other than that we've continued to highlight that will be an important function process in the future. And I would suggest, again, it will be important to take that project on. I would suggest once we get well past the pandemic and have economic clarity, additional fiscal clarity, and that's a process. A review of a province's revenue structure should be a regular process, periodic process, and this province is due for one.
Before the next election, though?
My expectation is my hope is that we would be in a position before the next election to at least announce a panel.
Okay, we're going to move to reporters on the phone. Operator, can you please put through the first question?
Chris Barco, Calgary Herald.
Hi, Minister. How long is it going to take for the government revenues and for government expenditures to return to normal and for the province's economy to fully recover from the 2020-2021 recession?
Well, that's a great question, Chris. In Budget 2021, we had suggested that we weren't going to fully recover in terms of our economic capacity until 2022. That remains our official projection. We'll be providing an economic update in our Q1 fiscal update in August, and there'll be more clarity around economic growth and recovery. And with respect to getting expenditures and revenues back to normal, certainly the fiscal year that we're in, so that's our current fiscal year that will end March 31st, 2022, there remain significant healthcare costs, as of course we've just kind of gone through the third wave of COVID, and considerable economic recovery costs. My expectation, and again, I think our fiscal plan would lay that out, that in the following year, 22-23 and 23-24, we start to see more normalized expenditure profiling, as we believe we'll be past the pandemic at that point. There will be continued strategic investments in economic recovery around diversification, infrastructure investment, but largely our expenditures will be more normalized. In terms of revenues, again, right now there remains a lot of economic uncertainty. Very pleased to see the recovery, the quick recovery in commodity prices that we've witnessed here in Q4 of our last fiscal year, but effectively Q1 of 2021. Those recovering prices and certainly an improving economy generally has contributed to higher government revenues in Q4 of our previous year, and so that's encouraging. But at this point in time, I think it's difficult to predict exactly when we will see revenue normalization. But again, I would say stay tuned for our Q1 fiscal update in August. We will provide a fresh round of economic assumptions and more clarity on the current year.
Chris, do you have a follow-up?
Yes. Can you speak, Minister, how essential is it for the July 1st reopening to go on without a hitch, without, maybe a relapse, towards getting the province and its fiscal situation and more broadly the economy back on track?
Well, Chris, we all know that many aspects, many businesses, particularly those in the service sector, entertainment sectors, tourism industry, have been extremely hard hit during the pandemic and have been hit directly as a result of the public health measures. So moving to really largely a full reopening in July 1st is so welcome. And I just want to say this, how much I have been amazed at the innovative, resilient approach and the resiliency of Alberta entrepreneurs during this time. And we've certainly provided support as a government during this time, but I'm not going to pretend that the support provided covered all losses, because in most cases it did not. So we know reopening is going to be critically important to that sector and critically important to economic recovery. I think what's encouraging as the service sector really gets back to work and moves forward post July 1st, that's going to be happening at a time when we've already seen some real growth in our natural resources sectors and some of our core industries, as well as emerging sectors such as the tech industry. The forestry industry has been so strong this last year. Agriculture has been solid. This current heat wave might be posing a challenge, but overall the agriculture industry is certainly has experienced a good year, and commodity prices are at almost record highs in many commodities. And the energy industry has really taken a positive uptick in Q1 of 2021. So those are all positives. In fact, we now have more employment in our natural resources sector than we had pre-COVID. Very, very positive development. And so as the service industry gets rolling again, obviously that will take some time as the tourism industry starts to get its feet under it. And again, that will take some time. I'm actually quite encouraged about future economic prospects.
Okay, operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Ellie Kreiderman, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Minister. I know you mentioned that a fiscal update will be coming in August, but are you optimistic about the second half of 2021 and a recovery of commodity prices and that sticking despite all the uncertainty that exists out there? Are you making any projections right now that are optimistic?
Well, Kelly, I'm not making any predictions right now. There is a whole lot of uncertainty that remains. However, I am generally optimistic about the last half of 2021, and the reason for that optimism is what I've seen in the first half of 2021, certainly strengthening commodity prices that appear to have some durability, an energy industry that has been repairing its balance sheets after the great energy price crash last year and is starting to deploy more capital in the field. We've hit record oil sands production on some months here in the last 6 months, which is very positive. We've seen record levels of investment, venture capital investment attraction in this province, largely supporting the tech sector and innovation. Again, agriculture strong, forestry strong. So I'm quite optimistic about the last half of 2021, but at this point in time, given all the uncertainty, I'm not making any predictions. Again, looking forward to presenting the Q1 fiscal update in August.
And just as a follow-up, we're seeing numbers for the losses on unloading train contracts on Keystone XL, on the Northwest Refinery, perhaps in the tens of billions. What does that tell you about government investment in big energy projects?
That's a very, very good question. And I really believe that governments have to be extremely wise, careful, and prudent when making investments of any type in terms of business investments. Now, KXL, that investment was made. That was a strategic, calculated decision, recognizing that there was risk associated with that decision, but the potential wealth creation from a KXL pipeline was so significant for this generation and future generations of Albertans. The decision was warranted. And again, we were transparent with Albertans when we entered into that agreement, entered into that investment. We structured our agreement so that the Alberta government's exposure would be limited. And in fact, we were very, very disappointed with the President Biden's cancellation of the permit. And I will say this, that we're going to be pursuing every legal means to recover our investment, or as much of it as possible. But we have we've been transparent. We've fully reported the Keystone XL loss in these financial statements. And again, that was a Keystone XL investment was a calculated decision based on the incredible wealth creation potential of that project.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Graham Thompson, iPolitics.
Yes, Minister, I was just wondering about the fiscal reckoning. The Premier discussed this a lot last year. You said wait until this year's budget. Of course, you didn't see a fiscal reckoning coming in this year's budget. But is that fiscal reckoning still on the horizon?
Graham, in Budget 2019, the first fiscal plan of this government, we laid out, presented a 4-year fiscal plan that would bring this province to balance. And a key component of that effort was to carefully and thoughtfully bring our cost per capita of delivering government services down, again, to align with other provinces. Even throughout the pandemic and this great fiscal and economic challenge, we've not lost sight of that goal. And we are making progress on that goal. So our expectation is that by 22-23, next fiscal year, in fact, we will start to already be meeting that range, and by the following year be fully within the range. Again, Alberta can no longer afford to be an outlier. So we continue on that plan. We look to bring our costs per capita, per person down carefully and thoughtfully, and especially during this time of economic challenge and hardship for many Albertans. But we remain intentional and optimistic that we're going to achieve our goal.
Okay, so follow-up then. Can you expect then to give us more details of what that might look like in your August update?
Well, the details of that plan have been revealed in Budget 2019, Budget 2020, and most recently in Budget 2021. We will certainly report on the progress that we're making in terms of achieving that goal, and stay tuned for Budget 2022.
Thank you. Operator, please put through the next caller.
Robert Tuttle, Bloomberg News.
Yeah, hi. I just want to ask about the rail contracts. Have all of them now been turned over to private companies? And if not, when will that be completed? I mean, what's happened with all of those?
All right. No, the answer is no. There are some contracts that remain in the government's hands. Again, at March 31st, 2020, we believed that, or we were in the late stages of arrangements to lay off this capacity onto the private sector. With the energy price collapse that occurred in March of 2020, some of those arrangements weren't completed. And so the government of Alberta has held on to that capacity. I believe we're holding on to railcar capacity of about 70,000 barrels per day, and we have completed contracts on about 50,000 barrels per day. So right now we're meeting the obligations in those contracts. We've taken a look at every option and continue to evaluate every option and opportunity to extricate ourselves from those contracts, but we will only make a move when it's in the best interest of Albertans. But I want to point something out. Because of the energy price collapse, our costs as a province on crude by rail are expected at this point in time to be kind of worst case scenario $2.3 billion. Had we continued with operating the crude by rail business function, a best case scenario, we would have been looking at a $2.7 billion loss. So we inherited a very, very difficult non-commercial arrangement. And we've been working to extricate ourselves as a government, as a province, from those contracts in the most fiduciary responsible way possible, and we'll continue to do that.
So is that capacity being used in any way, or is it just what's happening with the 70,000 barrels a day?
Right now, crude by rail activity in the province has dropped significantly. Our differential has narrowed, and crude by rail volumes have dropped, and it's the private sector that's entirely involved in crude by rail. The government is not involved right now.
Thank you. We are going to take one more question from the phone before we wrap up. Operator, can you please put through the final question?
Julian Latravers, Radio Canada.
Hi, thank you. Minister, you said that many economic forecasters have predicted that Alberta will lead all province growth this year, including the Conference Board of Canada, BMO, CIBC, and Desjardins. But the NDP said yesterday that the same experts forecast through 2022 that Alberta will lag behind comparing to other provinces. And now the Parliament budget officer said Alberta fiscal policy is not sustainable. Do you think that Alberta is really on the right track? How do you feel about that?
Yes, I do believe Alberta is on the right track. Now, I don't want to sugarcoat our situation. The global pandemic, again, great global economic contraction, and the energy price collapse hit the Alberta economy disproportionately hard, again, because of our exposure largely to the energy industry. And again, our fiscal results demonstrate our great fiscal challenge. But we've been doing all we can to position this province for economic recovery and growth. And based on what I see of Q4 of our previous fiscal year, which is effectively January 1, to March 31st of 2021, I'm quite encouraged about economic recovery and growth in this province. Again, we've seen very significant, a doubling of venture capital investment attraction in the province. We're seeing the energy industry rebound much quicker than we would have anticipated. Certainly the forestry sector, agriculture sectors are strong. So we're seeing strength across the economy. And so then when I, seek very credible forecasters such as the Conference Board of Canada, again, BMO, CIBC, Desjardins, predict that Alberta is going to lead the nation in GDP growth. Based on what I've seen in the first quarter of calendar year 2021, those projections do not surprise me.
Okay, thank you. That's all the time we have for today.